Hello, sinners and saints. What I want to talk to you about today is the notion, the feeling, the experience, the reality of playfulness. Hold on, don't leave, don't leave. This is going to be interesting. We're going to try and make this topic catch. Okay, here's why I'm thinking about this. I got an email from a friend of mine from Facebook, and his name is Mike Jones. Mike, if you're out there, hello. Mike, I'm gonna rib you a little bit now. Mike oftentimes asks me questions about Zen, and I oftentimes answer them. This question was subpar. Mike texts me 2 lines, and it's something along the lines of, I have been listening to Alan Watts. Alan Watts got my friend Mike thinking about playfulness. So Mike asked me, can you talk a little bit about playfulness in Zen Buddhism? And I thought to myself, no, Mike, I can't. It's a stupid question. I'm a serious man. I do serious things, serious videos. I'm a writer. Writers are very important these days and very serious people. And so I deleted his Facebook message. It was a Facebook message, not an email. Okay, then I'm going to tell you something. Okay, I'm going to tell you an immediate story about a creative thing, and then I'm going to take you back in time a little bit to an ayahuasca ceremony where I received a insight into the nature of creativity, and then we're going to tie all this back together into Zen. We're going to weave it into Zen and into the spiritual project. Okay, here's the deal. I have to swallow because I have saliva. I am, as you know, I'll share this with you once more, completing a novel that I have been working on for a very, very, very long time. Now, the first half of this book, I have worked to death. The book is in 5 parts. And the first 2 parts, I have worked to death to get this thing off the ground. Then the third part has flowed like honey, and I have felt like I haven't needed to work with it that much. Well, now I'm sitting down with it, looking at it, and realizing needs a little bit more work than I thought. Now, I had this moment today. This is all very fresh. I had this moment today where I took this big section, and I had seen, because my girlfriend had read it, she's an interesting one. She taught herself how to read at age, I think it was like age 4. She just knew how to read. And then when she went to school, she had to pretend like she didn't know how to read because her teacher was freaked out and creeped out, and the other students in the classroom were behaving strangely towards her when they found out she already knew how to read. So I don't know. I think this is like a karmic thing. Some people are they're born shaped a certain way, ready to rumble. And that was her with reading. And she read her whole life. She picked books off the shelf and she would just start reading them as a very small child. And so she's a good reader. She's got great intuitions and instincts. And she had just said something. She just marked something in the margins of my novel. And in that moment, my heart collapsed because I just finished editing this. It was like 10 pages, 20 pages of a book, and then I realized, cut it all out, like an instant. It was like, cut that whole section out. And I was ashamed. I was totally ashamed, and I was scared. You know, it's really hard to realize that you're bad at what you do. Which is oftentimes what happens when you're a writer. You're like floating on a wave of inspiration, and you're literally like imagining yourself. You're like, I don't know if I should write out my Pulitzer Prize acceptance speech or if I should just ad-lib it. And what about the National Book Awards? Should I write cue cards maybe? You know, and then the next day you pick your manuscript up and you're like, I'm ruined. It's garbage. And here's my point. One thing I realized today, as I was sitting there, shocked that these 20 pages had made it this far into my process, and I'm looking at these pages, and it's just falling into shape. What's wrong with them? And then something clicked, and I was brought back to when I was a very young boy. My first few first 5 years, 6, 7 years on this planet when I was totally fresh. Remember that? Remember back to when you used to play? Can you do it? Can you remember? It's so hard when you're an adult to remember that beginner's mind of a child, when you were at the start of your life. Remember what Shunryo Suzuki, the great Zen master, said? In the beginner's mind, there are all kinds of options, but in the master's mind, in the expert's mind, there are only a few options. Play is having a lot of options, is having a lot of possibilities, almost all possibilities. It's somehow stepping out of the Newtonian realm of reality and into the quantum realm of reality, where the wave functions are not quite collapsed yet, where everything is at play and in play. All sorts of probabilities are possible realities. So as I sat there, almost like dumbstruck, awestruck, with a flashback to my youth, I remembered what it was like to play. And I remembered what it was like. So I was thinking about why these chapters didn't work. And I was like, oh, it's like when you're a kid and you're playing. And the play doesn't quite click, right? It doesn't quite click. If you leave with anything from today's video, maybe somehow we've hit in that part of the gut where play used to happen when you were a kid, and you would come in from outside. Remember that? And your face was flushed, and you were so. It was like an orgasm. It was a playgasm, but not because you were a kid. It wasn't obviously erotic. It was like you were taken to another world, and you were allowed to be. You were allowed to create your own world, right? Sometimes it's very hard to remember what this was like. It's very hard to remember and to manifest Shunryo Suzuki's beginner's mind. It's not something you can engineer. It's not something you can make happen. It's something you just remember. You remember how to play. You remember to play. This is particularly salient because when I first started this novel project, when I got the very first seeds for the idea, I had left the monastery and I was in kind of a state of upheaval. And part of this state of upheaval meant opportunity and possibility, which can be terrifying. One reason I think we don't approach life with a playful attitude is we're terrified of failure. We're terrified of being hurt. We're terrified of, I think there are deep, deep traumas inside of us that help us put up walls to keep out the demons, the wolves, the lions, the marauders, right? Like we have one or two bad experiences when we're a kid and we're like, that playful attitude, no, that doesn't work. I can't be open. I can't be open in life, right? And when I left the monastery, I was incredibly open and I wanted to stay open. And I wanted to do something serious and new for me, and I needed to heal. What I'm saying is I did an ayahuasca trip. I went down to the Amazon, and I had found a shaman through a friend, and I went down to the Amazon with my girlfriend. It was like our honeymoon. It was like our first real time together. We went to the Amazon and did an ayahuasca journey. I mean, it was a very interesting time. But here's my point. You have an intention when you go into the ayahuasca ceremony. It's a very serious intention. And my intention was kind of basic and, a little bit self-serving, I concede. It was, how do I write fiction? How do you become an artist? The ceremony was in 3 stages. I'll tell you about the 3rd stage some other time. The first stage, so it was 3 nights. So it was 1 night on, 1 night off, 1 night on, 1 night off, a week total. So the first night was savage and brutal and totally and completely horrifying. After that, I told myself, I said, nope, not going to do that again. Then I had a dream the following night, and it was an interesting actress. I told you about this, but I'm going to be real quick. An interesting actress from the 80s, and she was like, hey, bro. She was at a bar. She's like, hey, come here. Hey, that whole psychedelic mistress of the dead thing that ayahuasca was, relax. That's just the introduction. You had to kind of prove yourself to come through the gate. That was gatekeeper ayahuasca. There's some more interesting stuff happening once you get through the gate. Come on back for the second ceremony. And so I did. Now, the first part of this ceremony was, of course, terrifying. Once the ayahuasca starts in, and the guys are chanting, and we're in the jungle, and the jungle is pressing in on you, and there's tarantulas and screeching things in the sky. A jungle is an intense place. It really makes you go crazy. Like there's a kind of madness in it for an anal retentive Westerner like myself. Add to that the strongest psychedelic drug on the planet, and you have an interesting experience. Now, it was scaring me again when I first was undergoing this experience, but I remembered when I was under the first part of the ceremony, and then I remembered my intention, and I thought I do want to get this stuff down on paper before I die, and I have a story for a novel. So ayahuasca, once more, how do I do fiction again? And a bunch of stuff happened, and then I was through the gate and in the plant, if you will, the plant of ayahuasca, the vine. And I looked up in the sky, and I was like, oh boy, here we are. And in like huge galactic neon lights, I saw the word play. That was my answer. How do you become an artist? An artist of life, an artist in your relationships. An artist is someone who loves to do something so much that they express the human condition through that thing that they love to do. So they love to do it. Tony Hawk loves to skateboard. He loves it so much you can see him when he's in the air doing his flips or whatever. It's like an art. Tolstoy offers you his stories. It's an art. When Virginia Woolf crafts her stream of consciousness novels, it's an art. It's people who love to do something so much they express the human condition through it. I felt that my Zen master and two other Zen masters I've met were artists of life. They turned their life into an expression of the Dharma. It's almost kind of a reverse thing. But in that moment, when I saw that word play, it was I got it. Play. Very simple. Very, very beautiful. And something I had completely forgotten. I'd become so serious as a monk. I'd become so beaten down by a lot of the stuff our community was working with at the end of my teacher's life and everything. A lot of the internecine struggles, a lot of the ego clashes. I'd forgotten to play. I noticed one thing with these two Zen masters that I talked about, who were like masters of living. That's all they were. They were people who manifested the truth or the Dharma, the spirit of Christ, God, Buddha. In these moments, I noticed this, it came up through them. They were incredibly fun to be around, right? They were fun. There was a twinkle in their eye. And anything seemed possible when you were around these people. My teacher could make fun his constipation. It would become this great problem we were all trying to solve together. And he was very interested in the death process. There's nothing, folks, less interesting, more terrifying, more mortifying than the aged collapse of a body, which involves fluids, weaknesses, memory loss, etc. And this mofo made it fun, and he made it fun because he approached it with with an open mind and curiosity and a lack of judgment. The point is, don't take yourself so seriously. Play, have some fun. Play is an expression of the cosmic truth that all things are at play. We could say that this is anicca, change, the principle of impermanence in Buddhism. As I said earlier, the fact that everything is up in the air can make us feel like we're getting ready to experience a trauma of some kind, like something's going to hit us, smack us in the face, right? And and we learn very early in our lives to protect ourselves so that we don't get smacked in the face. And a little part of us shuts down a little bit because we're afraid. We're afraid. And when we're afraid, we can't play. And when we can't play, we can't taste life. We shut down modes of experience. We keep certain parts of our brain from connecting to certain other parts of our brain. We lose the ability to lose ourselves. We always retain and hang on to some part of ourselves. My mentor told me that the biggest problem he has with students is that there's some part of them that can't let go. They're still hanging on to when their dad punched them in the head, or their mom was caught in bed with another guy, or that kid on the playground called them the F word or the N word or some other word, or some man or woman just rejected their flirtation, and on. The wounds go back, right? They're very unpleasant. And they keep us from playing. So don't forget how to play. Awaken that part of yourself. They used to call it the inner child back in the 90s. We don't use that term anymore, but maybe I just did. Reawaken that inner child, that tiny little giggler inside you. It's a sign. My teacher used to call it the laughing Buddha, and he would do that. Do that. I remember we had this big retreat called Rohatsu, and it was impossible. It was freaking impossible. It's so impossible that in Japan, you're supposed to sleep in the zendo all night, in your zazen posture like this. And in Japan, my teacher said they had sticks with little wooden cups on the end, and you would put the stick on your tan, the wooden bench, and you'd be doing your zazen, and you'd put your chin and you'd fall asleep. All right, so you're doing this for 7 days, and then you go in on the final day for your final koan practices. And I remember I was so done with fucking Zen. So done. The doneness was done. The cells of my body became conscious, and they formed middle fingers, and they gave that middle finger to the Dharma. That's how done I was with Zen. And I rampaged into my teacher's room to do my final koan. And I threw myself down in front of him, and he goes, he's like laughing. He's like, he does like 15 different kinds of laughter. I'm like, dude, did you lose your mind? And then he finally stops, and he's like, you must manifest laughing Buddha. Laughing Buddha, okay. And then he just rang his bell and didn't even give me a chance to answer the koan. So, today's Laughing Buddha. If you want to help me laugh like the Buddha, you can come on over to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Shozan Jack Hobner. That is how increasingly I make my living. How did this happen? The folks on Patreon have become an extremely important piece of my income. And that makes me happy. So if you want to support that project and this channel, you can come over to Patreon. There's essays up there, there's blog posts, and we do sitting. I'm actually going to do a sit this weekend, this Sunday. By the time you people on YouTube are watching this, the sit will long be over, and you can watch it on the live stream. So if you have trouble sitting sometimes, this is a good opportunity. Go to, I think it's called live stream. My sits are up there. It's just kind of fun to sit with somebody, even if it's just ridiculous. If I just give a little bit of sitting instruction, then we do 2 sits and I talk a little bit about Zen. Anyways, we're going to do that Sunday. This is the kind of things we do on Patreon. So if you want to support this channel, you can go there. There's also a PayPal link for a one-time donation in the video description below. But you don't have to do anything. You can go watch Joe Rogan or Brene Brown right now if you want to and skip that process entirely. But I enjoyed having you here. I enjoyed playing with you today. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go play with myself, by which I mean continue to work on my novel. Sayonara.